I'm a member of the Philippine Women's Center. And the question I have is about apartheid. And the reason why I'm asking is I really enjoy the analysis that all of you contribute to, the idea of how spaces are divided, people are divided along these lines of race, class, and gender, and how that's related to apartheid in Canada as well as in Palestine and other places, actually across the world. But what I'd like to ask you is how can you talk about something like apartheid when people, the mainstream's reaction against apartheid is that you're being racist by calling a certain state or nation an apartheid state? Like, how do you respond to that in a way without getting attacked or getting written off as being a radical and not being?
What year is it? I feel like it was 10 years ago, a while ago, in the Palestine Solidarity movement, kind of internationally and transnationally, as people in Palestine were starting to put forward a demand for boycott and sanctions. We had sort of a transnational debate about whether to take on the term at all of apartheid, because out of respect for South African apartheid. And there was a kind of a long and very involved debate that brought together radical activists from all over, including South Africa, to talk about whether this is an appropriate analysis, because we didn't want to be appropriating a struggle. The anti-apartheid movement was incredibly important, and we didn't want to detract from the sort of African focus. But at the same time, people, including Archbishop Desmond Tutu, went to Palestine and said, "This is it. This is it. If anything is apartheid, this is it." And so there was actually a long process through which, radically committed anti-racist folks from all over kind of came to this decision that we were going to put forward this analysis as we're building an international movement to try and build a solidarity movement. So that's the backstory, that there actually was a long consideration for a very long time with a group called the Jewish Women's Committee to End the Occupation. The reason we kept the name Jewish in our title is because everybody would always say, the media would always say, what's the other perspective? What's the Jewish perspective? Well, that is the Jewish perspective. There's enormous dissent around this within Israel. The idea that a state now, a very militarized, very right-wing apartheid state somehow represents Jewishness offends many Jews. And let's be clear on that. And there are many organizations that are Jewish that resist it. So the reason that Israeli apartheid and that phrase gets taken up as something that's politically incorrect to say is precisely to shut up the left. Because people who are progressive don't want to be anti-Semitic. Well, it isn't anti-Semitic to criticize a racist apartheid state. I'm here to tell you. Okay.
I just quickly wanted to say that, that's where language becomes so important. We have to name, things the way that they are. And that's when we can become, really important community organizers. When we have the capacity to step away from our ivory tower, from, the Justicia, the Philippine Women's Center, and be out and about with people that we may not connect with so much politically, that's our chance, to engage in popular education and not back away from what we know, and to use, our language and our words clearly. Canada is a racist project. We don't have to point to the LCP program, the SOP program, the low skill. We can point to Canada being imposed on, First Nations, Aboriginal territories. So there's so much that we can point to within our history and within our present, to make our point about racism, being real and being the fabric and the foundation of this nationalist project that we're all, living in right now. So we can't be shy from calling things the way that they need to be called. And footnote, when you for your question, I was just thinking too about as people involved in these struggles, we have to create our own platforms for voice of our peoples to be heard and to be told. So, like in my line of work, I'm developing a practice of transnational storytelling. So everything that that I've learned from the migrant women and their families, and the other mothers, left behind in Mexico that are also part of this migration spectrum. I want their voices and their stories to be told, because those are our stories, here in Canada. And if nobody tells our stories, they're going to be sensationalized. They're going to be edited, and edited in a very wrong way. Of course, as academics, our voice is there too, and and our work is not going to be perfect. It could always be up for questioning and challenging, but we have to start telling the stories of our own people, and that's why I struggle through with the ivory tower in order to do that. But we don't have to do that in the ivory tower. Now with technology and how techno-savvy I saw that you all were, we can create these cultural products ourselves. We can get really creative.
So again, we ask for this, because years ago I've been saying to the allies who are genuine in looking at this program and been writing about this. And I said, the only way that we are going to be listened to is when the issue of LCP and the scrapping of this program is going to be articulated by white, middle-class women. If it's only coming from our marginalized sector, no one is going to listen to us because we're already invisible. Right? So here it is. It was put in. The filmmaker did this. Again, it's gone. So what are we going to do? We have to continue to call for this scrapping. It's the only way for us, for all the ministers to turn their banners and, they say, that group, that Philippine Women's Center, keep on calling for this scrapping. What do you really want? They always ask me when I go to the parliament, what do you want? What's your alternative? We've been saying to scrap that program. And the alternative is to have the national child care program in this country. We know there's money coming from us, from women, from our labor. Put that into creating all these spaces so that we as women can continue to develop in this country, especially the marginalized ones. And they keep on saying, they always insult, that group, we better work with this group because that group. So if the Philippine Women's Center did not have this campaign, it would have been quiet. Quiet, quiet, quiet. LCP is a great program. But we continue to inject the contradictions within this country. Who cares? Right? We care. Okay, it's our life. It's the life of the women. We should continue to do that. If they criticize, never mind. Right? We've been criticized for over 20 years. This program has become worse. How much more if we didn't criticize this? So we should all criticize. Scrap the LCP. We should all be going to the streets every day. Scrap the LCP. Ibn Kenny.